Good stories are worth retelling, such as Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the classic tragedy about a man who creates a monster that destroys his life. Ever since its publication in 1818, it's held great influence over the world of literature. It's been adapted into stage plays, and later with the invention of film, Thomas Edison made the first silent version, which was only a short. But in the early talkie period, Universal created the most classic incarnation of the Frankenstein monster, played by Boris Karloff and designed by makeup artist Jack Pierce. It's the famous look, which appeared in parodies, commercials, cartoons, cereal boxes. It's a pop culture icon, and it has almost nothing to do with the book. Mary Shelley's vision has probably never been totally faithfully replicated 100%, but of all the film versions, wouldn't you like to know which one comes the closest? I would. So if you're as curious as I, and if you've seen my Dracula showdown from many years ago, then you know the drill. You're in for a deep analysis as I round up 12 films that will compete for the title of the most faithful feature film version of Frankenstein. I will be including the recent Guillermo del Toro version, which is now on Netflix. That means there will be many plot spoilers, if you care, so spoiler alert. Just to be clear, this is not about which is the best Frankenstein or my personal favorite. If it was, I'd probably be talking about Son of Frankenstein. That's the one that introduced the character Igor, but it has nothing to do with the book. The contest is about which film is the most accurate to Mary Shelley using the most concrete, unbiased facts. It will get tricky. I will have to make many judgment calls. I have obsessively and painstakingly reread the book and watched over the films. I've been so busy with this video, I stopped shaving. Yeah. So some of these films I've already seen many times before, and some are new to me. I don't know the winner yet. We're going to find out together. So before I set up the playing field, I must mention there was a filtering process. First of all, I'm not counting any stage plays that might have been filmed. It must be an actual movie. You can imagine there exist hundreds of Frankenstein films, but most of them had their own spin. Frankenstein Unbound has time travel, I, Frankenstein has battles with demons, Monster Squad has the monster teaming up with kids to fight the other classic monsters, and Frankenhooker has exploding prostitutes, which deviates from the book a little, you might say. Of course, movies should take creative liberties. We hardly ever expect it to be page for page verbatim. And it's harder than Dracula because Frankenstein is very philosophical. Mary Shelley wasn't just writing a story, she was writing sort of a thesis on the human condition. It's not as easy for that kind of thing to transcend onto film, so we'll have to take that into consideration. So get ready. After this, you're going to know more about Frankenstein than you ever thought. So let's line up the films, the Frankenstein dozen. I'll put them up there in chronological order. Starting in 1931, we have the original classic. I'll refer to it as the original, even though the lesser-known Edison version would technically be the original. Next up, 1935, is Bride of Frankenstein, which is a direct continuation. I normally wouldn't include sequels, but it has a fair amount of source material. It's as if the Mary Shelley story is split over two films, a volume 1 and 2, if you will. Both directed by James Whale, they come as a pair. And hey, Bride of Frankenstein even depicts Shelley in the opening scene as sort of a tribute. Next, 1957, is the Hammer version, Curse of Frankenstein, starring the classic pair of Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. It's the first on our list to be filmed in bloody red color. Then, in 73, we have an obscure, low-budget, made-for-TV version which aired on ABC. It was produced by Dan Curtis, who made Dark Shadows, and you might remember from my Dracula video, he also made the TV Dracula film that starred Jack Palance. The movie has two titles, and I mean literally, it has two title screens. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and then just Frankenstein. I'll call it the ABC version. Later that same year, 73, NBC aired their own version, but this time it had a unique title, Frankenstein the True Story, so I'll call it that. And then in 74, we have the Mel Brooks version, Young Frankenstein. Now, look, I know, this is not meant to be a straight-up adaptation, but come on, everybody loves Young Frankenstein, and let's see how it holds up against the rest. It might have a chance. You never know. Next, in 77, is Terror of Frankenstein, also known as Victor Frankenstein, produced by Aspect and distributed by Independent International. Next one, 1984, made for British TV. It aired on what is now known as ITV, but back then it was called, my American accent is going to make this difficult, but I believe it's pronounced Yorkshire. And if not, I'm sorry. The film is just called Frankenstein. That doesn't help us much, so I'll call it the Yorkshire version. Or you could just call it that one with Carrie Fisher. Next is yet another television version produced by Turner Pictures. I distinctly remember watching when it first premiered on TNT, Turner Network Television. I don't know whether to refer to it as the 92 version or the 93 version. The internet says it was 92, but I know firsthand it was 93, June 13th, Sunday, 8 p.m., with an encore screening at 11. All these years I assumed the internet was wrong, but apparently, according to IMDb, it was first shown in the UK on December 29th, 1992. If that's true, there's no information on where it was shown. Was it TV, film festival, somebody's basement? Nobody knows. Anyway, the title's just Frankenstein, so I'm going to call it the TNT version. Following right on its heels in 94 was the big-budget theatrical version directed by and starring Kenneth Branagh. The official title is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but it's commonly known as the Branagh version. Next, in 2004, we have one more TV version. It was produced by Hallmark and originally released as a two-part miniseries. The title is just Frankenstein. My God. It's confusing because there's another film from the same year which is also titled Frankenstein. That one was a much looser adaptation, so thankfully we can ignore it. But what about this one? I'm just going to call it the Hallmark version. And then at last, in 2025, we have the Guillermo del Toro version, which is the most recent one and the catalyst for me finally making this video. It's called Frankenstein. Gee, thanks Del Toro. I'll just call it the Del Toro version. So there you have the 12 contenders. Now that I've introduced them, the only thing left before getting into the showdown is to mention the deviations. Each film has its own little twists. The original has the hunchback assistant Fritz, while Bride has the villain Dr. Pretorius. In Curse of Frankenstein, there's a love affair. In the ABC version, Frankenstein uses the heart of one of his assistants who is shot at while helping him rob graves. In True Story, Frankenstein is actually not the first one to discover the secret of life. In Young Frankenstein, he's Frankenstein. In Terror of Frankenstein, the monster looks like John 5. In the Yorkshire version, the monster thinks Frankenstein is God. In the TNT version, some of Frankenstein's earlier experiments include a cat snake and a porcupine rabbit, and he shares a psychic link with the monster. In Branagh's version, well, just wait till we get to it. The Hallmark version has the monster making friends with a little girl, which seems to be lifted from the original. And at last, the Del Toro version has a new character played by Christoph Waltz, who funds Frankenstein's experiments to create life, and who ironically profits from war and death. Also, the relations between Frankenstein, Elizabeth, and the monster are totally reinvented, which we will get to soon. So what do these deviations amount to? Well, this is the most subjective area of the contest. If I start counting up deviations, I'll be digging a hole. We can factor these in the event of a close race, but quite simply, I'll be focusing on the amount of source material from the book. Points will be given out for each character, event, and thematic elements. The film to rack up the most points wins. You ready? So keep your eye on the score, place your bets, let's go. First, the characters. Victor Frankenstein is obviously included in every version. In the original and Bride, they switch his name to Henry, but it's still the same character. So that's a point right across the board, except for Young Frankenstein. He's actually the grandson, Frederick Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
So I guess we can't give it the point, but hang on. Victor appears as a painting on the wall. Technically, I'd say that's a point. Next is the creature, or monster if you prefer. The original publication says creature 69 times and monster 33 times. So I'll go with creature to stay more true with the book. Now, of course, the creature is in every movie in some form, so this is going to be another wash. So let's make it a little harder. I'll give a point for any film that depicts the creature with the same physical appearance as described in the book. Now, paraphrasing here, it says here, he has yellow skin that scarcely covers the muscles and arteries. His hair is lustrous black and flowing. He has watery eyes, black lips and pearly white teeth. Do any of these films match? No, 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 no. True Story has a unique twist where the creature starts off normal and then his flesh gradually decays. Neat idea, but no, no. Terror has the black lips, but aside from that, no, 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 no. Hallmark and Del Toro have the black flowing hair, but no, no. 12 films all fail. No point. But here's a chance for redemption. In common pop culture, the monster's portrayed as a grumbling brute who only growls and groans. But in the book, he learns to speak and becomes highly articulate. In the original, he's mute, but Bride completes the story and he finds his voice. In Curse, he's practically a zombie, says nothing. ABC plays by the book. In True Story, it's actually Frankenstein who teaches him to speak. Young Frankenstein is an odd case where it's Frederick's brain in the monster, so it's technically Frederick speaking. The context is different, but hey, the creature speaks. And the rest of them, more or less, play by the book. In the book, the creature is a vengeful killer with a body count. Often in the movies, he kills by accident or in self-defense, but in the book, he straight up murders Frankenstein's loved ones out of revenge. We will get into all the specific kills eventually, but I'm giving a point for any film where the creature kills anyone on purpose. In the original, he kills Fritz and Dr. Waldman out of self-defense, and then he kills the little girl by accident. He later throws Frankenstein off a windmill, but he survives, so no point. In Bride, he's a little more vicious. Right from the beginning, he kills a husband and wife for no apparent reason. Later, he throws Carl off a rooftop and blows up Dr. Pretorius and the bride. Nothing at all like the book, but yes, he kills on purpose. In Curse, he's not successful most of the time, but he does kill the maid Justine, even though Frankenstein arranges it. ABC, he kills the characters from the book, which means we'll have a better opportunity to talk specifics when we go over all the plot points. True Story is a different set of circumstances, but in short, yes, we'll get to it later. Young Frankenstein, definitely no. Terror, yes. Yorkshire, yes, even though some of it's accidental. TNT, he has a huge body count, even kills an entire ship crew. In Brana, he rips a heart out. In Hallmark, some of the kills are accidental and some are intentional. Del Toro, it seems like it's always in self-defense. Moving on, the character Elizabeth is Frankenstein's fiancée. In the 1818 publication, she's also Frankenstein's cousin, which I guess was a common thing back in those times. But afterwards, in the 1831 edition, Shelley changed her to being an orphan who Frankenstein's parents brought in. She appears in all the films, but in Young Frankenstein, if you want to be technical, she's engaged to Frederick, not Victor. So she can't be the same Elizabeth. Del Toro takes the biggest departure by having her being engaged to William. Victor has feelings for her, but she hates him. Terror, TNT, Brana, and Hallmark mention she's an orphan, while Curse is the only one that says, hey, we like the incestuous idea that she's his cousin. Next is William Frankenstein, who's Victor's younger brother. Many of the early films ignored him, but as you can see, he has a pretty decent track record, being included in 8 of the films on our list. Next is Alphonse Frankenstein, who is Victor's father. As you can see, he was in the original right off the bat, and then disappeared for a little while, only to come back in the 70s, and he stuck around for the more recent films. Del Toro takes the biggest departure, making him into one of those abusive fathers. Caroline Beaufort Frankenstein is the mother. She dies of scarlet fever early on. And while she's absent from most of the films, Curse acknowledges her with a funeral scene. In the Yorkshire version, the family's giving a toast to her painting on the wall, and then in our last 3 films, she finally appears. In Brana, she dies in a gruesome childbirth scene, and in Del Toro's, she also dies of childbirth. But she appears or is acknowledged in these 5 films. The character of Henry Clerval is a close friend to Frankenstein. In the original film, he has the name Victor because they switched the names for no apparent reason, just to be confusing perhaps. In Curse, the character Paul kind of fills his spot as the voice of sanity and reason, but he's not the same character. More on him soon. Henry appears in all the rest, aside from Young and Del Toro. Oddly, in True Story, he's also a scientist, and he's the one who discovers the secret of life before Frankenstein does. Frankenstein carries on Henry's experiments. What a twist. The character Justine Moritz is a member of the Frankenstein household and has a vital role in the story, which we will get to. So what's up with the first image? Clearly that's not Justine, but they gave him her last name. So in the original film, the character who's supposed to be Henry has the combined name of Victor Moritz. It's kind of like a reference to Justine, but by no means is this the same character. In Curse, she's a maid who has an affair with Frankenstein, tries to blackmail him, and then he unleashes the creature on her. Totally different circumstances. She's more like one of those name-only characters, but still, I guess it counts. It wasn't until Yorkshire, TNT, Brana, and Hallmark when she got her dues. In the book, Frankenstein studies under two professors, Dr. Waldman and Dr. Kremp. Most of the films combine them into one character, which makes sense. When adapting into a film, sometimes less characters can provide more focus. Only Brana and Hallmark acknowledge both professors, but all the movies take liberties. In the original, it's Dr. Waldman. He's the one who has the brain specimen in the classroom that Frankenstein sends Fritz to steal. In Curse, he's Dr. Kremp, but Frankenstein is on a first-name basis with him, calling him Paul. They expand his role, not only being a mentor, but a close friend who turns into an enemy as he tries to stop Frankenstein from going too far with his experiments. He even gets into a physical struggle with Frankenstein, which accidentally causes the creature's brain to get damaged before Frankenstein places it into the skull. ABC has some version of the professor in the beginning trying to discourage Frankenstein. Only in the end credits do they reveal the name as Dr. Waldman. In True Story, they swap him out for an entirely different character, Dr. Polidori, who is named after the writer John Polidori, who was involved in a ghost story writing contest with Mary Shelley, which is what led to Frankenstein and Polidori's story The Vampire. So that's a story for another day. Anyway, his character actually seems to be based on Dr. Pretorius from Bride, because he's essentially the villain and forces Frankenstein to continue his experiments. Moving on, in Terror, he's Professor Waldheim, who is at first discouraging, but then becomes more supportive to Frankenstein. Brana and Hallmark focus on Dr. Waldman, while Dr. Kremp is so brief that if you blink, you'll miss him, so no extra point necessary. Del Toro goes with Kremp, but he's a very minor character. To sum it up, half the films get a point. Next is D. Lacey, commonly known as the Old Blind Man. But if you want to be a snob, next time somebody calls him the Old Blind Man, you say, "Oh, you mean D. Lacey?" He's in all the films except the original. He's usually not referred to by name, but his role is mostly the same, as the guy who makes friends with the creature, except in Curse, which is entirely different. He meets the creature in the woods and is afraid of him, so he attacks him with a stick, and then the creature kills him off screen. It's a stretch, but it seems to at least be acknowledging the character. ABC is the only one where he's not blind. Instead, it's his daughter Agatha, and the rest of the films are self-explanatory. Then there's D. Lacey's family. In the book, it's mainly his children, Agatha and Felix. They pretty much appear in half of the films. Nothing remarkable to note. However, in the book, there's an additional Turkish character named Safi who's welcomed into the family and has a complicated backstory where Felix helped her father escape prison. The ABC version is the only one to include Safi. So, that's another point. Robert Walton is the ship captain who is hell-bent on reaching the North Pole. In True Story, he appears in a minor role, but he's a more substantial part in Terror, TNT, Brana, Hallmark, and Del Toro, even though he's not always called by name. And now that I've introduced the characters, it's time to get into the plot. The book opens on the ship, where Captain Walton finds Frankenstein on the ice. He brings him aboard, and then Frankenstein tells his tale. This part was ignored in most of the early films, and aside from Terror, you're looking at that bottom row. At a young age, Frankenstein witnesses lightning destroying a tree. This inspires him to study the laws of electricity and foreshadows the destructive nature it can bring. Only 2 films depict this crucial moment, Branagh and Hallmark. Look at Branagh and Hallmark, dead even. You might think of the grave robbing scenes as a movie trope, but in the book, Frankenstein does in fact say, "I collected bones from charnel houses." So I'm giving a point for any film that involves stealing bodies or body parts. TNT is the only one where Frankenstein grows the monster in a tank. Perhaps the biggest key scene of all is the creation of the creature. And quite simply, it happens in all the films. With Bride, it's a little different because the monster was already created in the first film. We will give a point later for the creation of the bride. But the interesting thing about this is that the book says almost nothing about the scientific procedure. This is where the movies stepped in and invented this scene from scratch. The original has all those amazing electrical gadgets, sparkling and emitting electricity. The monster's raised up through the roof to get struck by lightning. True Story uses solar energy and has all those weird glowing effects. The Yorkshire version has more pyro than a Kiss concert. In TNT, he subjects himself to some kind of magnetic field that clones him into an embryo which grows into the creature. And the craziest one has got to be Branagh. He's in like a big steampunk lair. Man, he's running around shirtless and sweaty, pulling on ropes and chains, screaming like a maniac. He's using electric eels. There's a big pulsating sack on the ceiling. This whole scene is like the most edgy 90s stuff. Just put some 9-inch nails over it. And then there's all this stuff with the brains. The original started the whole concept of the abnormal brain going into the monster. Young Frankenstein spoofed it.
Abby who? Abby normal.
In True Story, he uses Henry's brain. In Branagh, he uses Dr. Waldman's. And in the book, you want to know where the brain came from? Nobody. It never explains a thing. All the creativity and imagination that went into this famous trope, the creation scene, it's not described in the book at all. So you know what? The book loses a point. In the book, after the creature comes to life, Frankenstein is horrified and rejects it. It's perhaps the most important aspect of the whole story. It's the whole reason the creature becomes a vengeful wrathchild. How could any of the films miss this? Well, get ready to be surprised. The original, not at all. Frankenstein is the only one who has faith in the monster from the start, even though he has guilt later on. The whole reason the monster attacks in the first place is because Fritz runs at him with a flaming torch. But I'm looking for a straight-up rejection by Frankenstein that is unprompted. In Curse, the creature straight up tries to kill Frankenstein from the get-go. In ABC, Frankenstein tries teaching the creature until the creature accidentally hugs his assistant Otto to death. In True Story, he calls the creature beautiful, and only later when the flesh starts decaying is when the trouble starts. It's actually quite peculiar why people turn on the creature just because of the skin decay. That would be like if somebody had a rash on their face and people start screaming and flipping out. It's unbelievably insensitive. In Young Frankenstein, everything starts out fine until Igor lights a match. Terror is the first one to give us exactly what we're looking for. He abandons the creature on first sight. The Yorkshire version is unclear. He says the eyes, as if he's kind of appalled, but then the creature somewhat attacks him and he cowers back. In TNT, I can only read from Frankenstein's face that he seems pleased until the creature starts coughing and then runs away by his own will. In Branagh, it's kind of weird. He seems fine at first, but then while helping the creature to his feet, sort of accidentally gets the creature hung up on a chain somehow, and then he says, "What have I done?" So I guess it's close enough. Hallmark is also close enough. The creature shakes him out of bed, which would scare anybody, but then he starts throwing stuff at the creature. In Del Toro, he fully accepts the creature until much later they have a falling out. Frankenstein's obsession leads to isolation from his loved ones. Many of the films have a scene where some combination of characters, usually Henry and Elizabeth, are discussing how concerned they are with Victor and how distant he's become. In TNT and Branagh, they're tending to him while he's sick, which isn't exactly the type of distant concern I'm looking for. In the book, the creature is attacked at first sight. People throw stones and other weapons at him. I'm giving a point to any film where the creature is attacked unprompted. It happens in most, but sometimes it's kinda iffy. In Curse, the blind man is afraid, so he's acting in self-defense, and then I guess so is the creature. In True Story, again, it's a situation where the attacker feels threatened. In Hallmark, the creature is basically trespassing, so it's debatable, but I think the measure of the assault counts. In Young Frankenstein, they throw vegetables at him on stage. I think that counts. The Yorkshire version is the most brutal. He gets a shattered bottle to the face. And the one that takes the cake is Brana. Within minutes, he has an entire town coming after him. Anyway, I gave him all the point, except True Story and Curse. The creature sees his reflection in a pool of water and is horrified. Many of the films preferred a mirror, but the idea is the same. The creature saves a girl from drowning and is rewarded by being shot at. I think this is a key moment that demonstrates how the creature has good intentions but is treated unfairly. Such a simple scene to shoot, but only Bride and TNT chose to include it. The creature hides in a hut and spies on the DeLacy family. He ends up living there for a long time, observing the family. This is where he learns to speak, and furthermore, learns about humanity. I think this is one of the best parts of the book, but it's only in half the films here. The details vary, but generally, it's the same idea. The creature meets DeLacy and becomes friends. It's become one of the most famous movie scenes, included in all the films except the original and Curse. I only make note that in Curse he does meet a blind man, but the context is way too different. The rest have some variations, such as in ABC, it's Agatha who's blind, but the idea is the same. Things go wrong when Felix returns and attacks the creature. The films take many liberties, but regardless, the creature is forced to leave the cabin in some way. In Bride, it's hikers who lost their way. In ABC and True Story, it's more or less like the book. In Young Frankenstein, his finger is set aflame. It's funny, but doesn't get the point. Nobody forced him to leave. In Terror, it's the family again. The Yorkshire version has the most unique twist. It's robbers who recognize the creature's body because they were the ones who stole the corpse for Frankenstein. In TNT, it's bounty hunters who think he's a criminal on the run. In Brana, there's an abusive landlord, but then later the family comes. And in Hallmark and Del Toro, it's more like the book. The creature reads from Frankenstein's journal. This is where he learns of his origins and begins to seek out his creator. It's included in Terror, Brana, Hallmark, and Del Toro. The funny thing about Terror is that we're in a flashback. The creature is telling Frankenstein his story, which would include the moment he found the journal, but now that he's reading the journal, it flashes back into Frankenstein's story. So it's a flashback within a flashback, and this would mean the creature is repeating Frankenstein's story back to him, so it makes no sense. And not to mention, Frankenstein is the one telling the whole story to Captain Walton. The creature wants revenge on Frankenstein for abandoning him. This is where the killing spree starts. He meets William, and after realizing he's Frankenstein's younger brother, he kills him. I'm only giving the point if it's a deliberate murder. In ABC, it's an accident. He's only trying to keep William from screaming, but unintentionally smothers him. In True Story, William falls off a boat and drowns early on. His death becomes the inspiration for Frankenstein wanting to create life. A unique twist, but far off the mark. In Terror, yes, he murders him. In Yorkshire, it's another one of those hugging accidents. In TNT, he acts like a creep, scaring Justine, who scares a horse, who drops William. An accident. In Brana, it happens off-screen, but he later confirms, I held and crushed him. Intentional. Hallmark is another one where he tries to stop him from screaming, but accidentally smothers him. In Del Toro, he's attacked by William, so I guess you could say it's self-defense. So only in 2 films does he murder William, like in the book. I'm disappointed in you all. Not only does the creature murder William, but he frames Justine for that same murder by planting William's locket on her. Most of the films don't even have Justine to begin with, so this narrows it down to only 3 films that include this crucial plot point. In TNT, she's never actually arrested, but the priest blames her. Next, Justine is executed, an act of unfair justice. In Curse, like I said, she's killed by the creature directly. In Yorkshire, she runs from the creature and falls off a cliff. In TNT, she takes her own life by overdose. And the only 2 that actually have her being executed are Branagh and Hallmark. Especially Branagh, boy, they don't waste time. They hang her immediately without any trial. And by the way, look how close that score is. Frankenstein confronts the creature. Now, this could be a complete wash because technically in all the films, the monster meets his maker. The dialogue varies across them all, so before I can give any points, I have to be more specific. This is when the creature tells Frankenstein about all the things that happened before. I'm not just talking about some expositional dialogue, I mean a full flashback like in the book. The movies typically show you everything in chronological order, like I've done so far. But Shelley chooses to withhold information and then allows us to experience it from the creature's perspective. Only 2 films use the flashback. I'm not counting Hallmark because it's a very brief flashback that only reveals what happened with William. Del Toro's version actually goes all the way with a whole section called The Creature's Tale. Also in this meeting, after the flashback, a big key moment happens when the monster demands Frankenstein to make him a female companion. It happens in many of the films, and worth noting that in True Story, it's Dr. Polidori who forces Frankenstein to do it. It's similar to the situation in Bride, where Dr. Pretorius is the one who orchestrates it, but in True Story, the monster doesn't have much of an active role in this part. So I don't think I'm giving it the point. Also, worth noting that in the Yorkshire version and Del Toro's, Frankenstein simply says no. And Branagh and Hallmark in basically a tie. I mean, look at that. Then, in the book, Frankenstein travels to Scotland and creates the monster's mate. The part about Scotland pretty much gets thrown out the window, but the important thing here is that he must actually create the female creature. Worth noting that young Frankenstein makes reference to the classic Universal Bride, but it's just Elizabeth sporting the look. The rest pictured there all get the point, but just some notes. True Story, I guess counts, but it's the head of Agatha, and it's not really the monster's bride. It's just a random second creature named Prima, who Dr. Polidori wants to adapt into society as his big experiment. Branagh's has the most unique and disturbing take. Here, Frankenstein refuses, the creature kills Elizabeth, and then Frankenstein resurrects her in a sad, demented fit of desperation. And then the creature tries to take her for his own, and they fight over her. It's really messed up. In the book, Frankenstein doesn't finish the job. He has second thoughts and destroys the bride's body. For it to count, it has to be a deliberate act on Frankenstein's part. Bride is disqualified. Even though she does meet her demise, it's by an explosion triggered by the monster. With ABC, a bunch of sparks go off and she screams. It's not clear at all what happens, but yes, it does seem like Frankenstein abandons the project. In True Story, it's the creature who kills her. After he recognizes the head of Agatha, he tears the head from the body. In Terror, he never does destroy the creation, but he refuses to bring her to life, so it's basically the same intention. In TNT, he stops because it's causing his wife too much pain, as he has to use her for the cloning. But man, I gotta say, when all the blood and guts start spilling out of the tank, it's pretty gross. I've always been disturbed by this scene. It plays almost like a miscarriage or an abortion. In Branagh, she takes her own life in a spectacular fiery inferno. Since it's by her own will, not Frankenstein's, it doesn't count. And in Hallmark, Frankenstein burns her. Hallmark is inching ahead there. In the book, after Frankenstein destroys her, the creature warns him that he will be with him on his wedding night. ABC Terror and Hallmark are spot on. In TNT and Brana, the warning happens earlier in advance, but it's still there. In Del Toro, there's no such line, although he is still pretty pissed. Next in the book, the creature murders Henry. In ABC, don't blink, you'll miss it, but it's there. In True Story, Henry dies of a heart attack early on. No point. The rest are pretty straightforward murders, but I gotta say, TNT takes the cake. He is impaled on a wall. Then Frankenstein is arrested for Henry's murder. In Curse, he's sent to prison, but not for Henry, as there is no Henry. Only 2 films have the scene we're looking for. And in TNT, he's charged with 3 murders total. Next, Frankenstein is acquitted. In TNT, he escapes the authorities, unlike the book. In Hallmark, it seems more like his father is bailing him out, but he does mention that Elizabeth spoke to eyewitnesses, so he's acquitted, I guess. Only film to get the point. In the book, the creature follows through with his warning and murders Elizabeth on the wedding night. Because it varies across the films, I'm given multiple points based on accuracy. If Elizabeth is attacked by the creature, that's a point. If she's killed, that's another point. If it happens on the wedding night, another point. Here we go. Original, she's attacked on the wedding night, 2 points. Bride, nada. Curse, she's attacked, 1 point. He probably would have killed her, but Frankenstein fires a shot and accidentally kills her himself. In ABC, she's attacked and killed on the wedding night, 3 points. In True Story, she's attacked and killed on the ship, 2 points. And in Young Frankenstein, there's a much different type of encounter.
Woof!
In Terror, she's attacked and killed, 2 points. In the Yorkshire version, she's attacked and killed, 2 points. In TNT, she's attacked and killed on the wedding night, 3 points. In Brana, he attacks and rips her goddamn heart out, and it's on the wedding night, 3 points. In Hallmark, she's attacked and killed on the wedding night, 3 points. In Del Toro's, the creature and Elizabeth are friends, and it's Frankenstein who shoots Elizabeth by accident, possibly paying tribute to Curse. No points. Frankenstein's father is sickened with grief and eventually dies. Well, to some varying degree, it happens in 3 of the films. In TNT, he's murdered off-screen by the creature. In Brana, it's unclear what happened to him. We see the monster closing his eyelids, implying that he must have killed him in some way. And in Hallmark, his father is grief-stricken. He goes insane, but he doesn't die. So, I don't know. I mean, none of them are really the exact thing we're looking for, so no point here. There's a great moment in the book where Frankenstein's in the cemetery crying over the graves of William, Elizabeth, and his father, wishing revenge on the creature, and then the creature shows up to taunt him, and that's when the final chase begins. Does that not seem like an awesome cinematic moment? In a cemetery, crying over the graves, the monsters tease him. If you were writing a Frankenstein film, wouldn't you include that scene? Well, all these filmmakers said, nah. The ABC version does have a scene where he's in a cemetery, but I get no sense that any of those graves are family. In Terror, he does visit the family graves, but the creature speaks over the scene in voiceover. Close enough. In TNT, it's just William's grave, and it happens earlier in the film, but it's there. In Hallmark, he's at the graves and finds a written note from the creature. Close enough. In the end, he chases the creature all the way to the Arctic. In True Story, he goes on a sea voyage with Elizabeth for mental health reasons. Dr. Polidori sneaks aboard, and so does the creature, and it's the creature who drives the ship to the North Pole. So close, but so far. No point. But in Terror and that trusty bottom row of TNT, Brana, Hallmark, and Del Toro, all get the point. But there's another key point from the book. The creature leaves Frankenstein food along the way. He doesn't want Frankenstein to die. He wants him to suffer. It's like a game he's playing. Only the Hallmark version has the food. An additional point for that. Frankenstein tells Captain Walton to destroy the creature. It only happens in TNT and Hallmark, and TNT is the only one where Walton actually tries to go through with it, but the creature ends up killing the whole crew. In the book, Frankenstein dies on the ship of illness before the creature comes in. In the original film, he's thrown from a windmill but survives. In Bride, nothing happens to him. In Curse, he's sent to the guillotine, and if you go by the sequel, Revenge of Frankenstein, he escapes. In ABC, he falls on a spike in a churchyard and dies in the monster's arms. In True Story, he makes amends with the creature and they both die in an avalanche. In Young Frankenstein, he swaps brains with the monster. And in Terror, he dies on the ship, just like in the book. Wow, a point. In the Yorkshire version, there's no way to decipher what is happening. The creature cries in Frankenstein's lap, and then the whole lab explodes for no apparent reason. In TNT, he says, "I'll help us both," and then he tackles the creature through the ship window, and they both die in the icy water. But in Branagh, Hallmark, and Del Toro, he dies on the ship, pretty much like the book. In the book, after Frankenstein dies, the creature comes in and gives a final, remorseful speech. If you've read the book, you know this is one epic monologue. Unfortunately, you don't get much of that in the films. To some varying degree, the monster does give some final words. In Terror, he says, "In death, I cease to be a monster." So there's some great lines, but nothing that amounts to the book. In Hallmark, the creature has the most to say, so I think that's the only film that deserves the point. In the book, the creature takes his own life by burning himself in the agony of the torturing flames. Now, just to be clear, I will give the point to any film where the creature takes his own life in the Arctic. In the original film, he dies in a burning windmill, only to survive for the sequel, Bride, where he dies once again in an explosion that he causes himself. In Curse, he's burned and then falls through a window into a pool of acid. In ABC, he's shot and then carries Frankenstein's body away before being shot again and dies. In True Story, like I said, they die together in an avalanche. In Young Frankenstein, he lives. In Terror, he walks away into the dark snowscape, implying that he takes his own life, which is basically the essence of the book. In Yorkshire, it's anybody's guess what's going on. TNT, they both fall in the icy water. In Branagh, he burns himself along with Frankenstein's corpse, so I guess that's the closest we're going to get. In Hallmark, he carries Frankenstein away, but it is implied he dies out there in the snow. And Del Toro's, he is completely invincible. I mean, literally, his wounds regenerate, and at one point, a stick of dynamite blows up in his face, obliterating everything around him, and he's totally unharmed. So does he die? I'm going to say no. That covers the plot, but let's look at some thematic elements. First is the idea of ambition and how it can lead to one's downfall. Captain Walton wants to reach the North Pole, and Frankenstein wants to create life. Both men face a great cost in their pursuit of glory. All the films portray Frankenstein as an obsessed scientist, but the question is, which films best encompass this theme of ambition? It's tough, so I'm going to go with my gut instinct and give a point to Terror and that bottom row. Those are the films that gave me the best impression of that theme. The next theme is the idea of the fallen angel. The creature reads the book Paradise Lost, in which Lucifer is an angel rejected by God. The creature relates to him how his own creator rejected him. "Misery made me a fiend," he says. This may be a stretch, but I do get that impression from Bride. The monster tries so hard to be friendly with people, but he gets assaulted every step of the way, and then he retreats into a graveyard surrounded by holy imagery. He descends into the crypt among the corpses and says,
"I love dead, hate living."
It doesn't hit the nail on the head, but the theme of being rejected from heaven and then making hell your home is definitely on par. ABC just barely ekes out a point for including an on-screen quote from Paradise Lost. Hallmark shows the monster reading from Paradise Lost, just like in the book. And Del Toro has the burning archangel, which is one of the more outlandish scenes from that movie. You can interpret it any way you like, but I think it signifies Frankenstein's fall from grace and can be tied to the fallen angel if you really want. Then there's the theme of justice and prejudice. I've already given a point to every film where people attack the monster based on his physical appearance, so let's look at the law enforcement aspect. I'm giving a point to any film where there is either an arrest or a verdict or a biased judgment placed on any of the main characters. I'm not seeing it in ABC or Terror, and in Yorkshire and Del Toro, there's a hanging, but it doesn't happen to any of the main characters, and it's not a main part of the plot. The rest all get the point. One of the biggest themes is revenge. Frankenstein and the creature become mortal enemies, stuck in a cycle of hate which ultimately destroys them both. I'm looking for actual lines that either mention revenge or say something scornful alluding to it. Like this.
I swear by the God who made me, I will destroy you!
I will have revenge. Frankenstein!
So all the films with a juicy line about revenge gets a point. Sometimes it's easy to forget that the book wasn't just called Frankenstein. It had a subtitle, The Modern Prometheus, based on the Greek myth. The story varies, but basically Prometheus creates humans and then steals fire from Zeus and gives it to the humans. The fire represents knowledge and technology, and then he gets his liver eaten by a bird and all this stuff. But anyway, in Frankenstein, it's not explicitly mentioned in the actual text, but the subtitle implies that Frankenstein is like Prometheus. They're both creators who steal forbidden knowledge and are punished for it. All the films follow the basic story of Frankenstein, so it could be a wash and therefore kind of meaningless. So let's give a point only if they distinctly mention Prometheus. In True Story, Henry is lighting some candles and talking about how Prometheus brought fire from the heavens. In Terror, Professor Waldheim is in front of a sketch or a painting of Prometheus, reciting the Greek myth to Frankenstein as a warning against the pursuit of knowledge. As for Hallmark, it's the name of the ship. Sure. Frankenstein also makes connections to the story of creation, specifically Adam and Eve. The monster compares himself to Adam, having been put there by a creator. But unlike Adam, he has no Eve, no female companion. True Story, Terror, Yorkshire, and Del Toro are the only ones that make explicit mention of Adam and or Eve. A related theme is isolation and the desire for friendship and companionship. I guess you could say they all have this theme in some way, except for Curse. This creature does not seem like he's trying to make a friend at all. Let's wrap this up. One more theme, and probably the most important theme of all, nature versus nurture. It proposes a question, is the creature inherently evil, or is he only acting evil because of how he's conditioned? Sure, you could read into any of the films that way, but we're looking for something specific that jumps out. I'm not really getting it here. Are there any? Well, in Young Frankenstein, Frederick is making a case for the monster, telling him he is good.
This is a nice boy.
And later, when the monster's speaking with Frederick's brain, he definitely implies he acts the way he does based on how he was nurtured.
In my loneliness, I decided that if I could not inspire love, which was my deepest hope, I would instead cause fear.
I'd say this fits the theme. I'm giving it the point. You did it, young Frankenstein. You beat them all. But of course, as you'd expect, young Frankenstein comes out dead last. It was worth a try. But let's look at that final score. If you were keeping your eye on it, you're already one step ahead of me. The 2004 Hallmark miniseries is the definitive winner. I guess Hallmark doesn't mess around. And once again, I'm not saying it's the best or the most entertaining, but it is the most faithful to the book. Whew, that was exhausting. Oh, and you want to know what I think of the Del Toro version? It's good.